So welcome everybody to round 1, game 1 in Exodus eSports' Bad Bot Buddies 2 vs 2 tournament. I'm WPMarshall. I'm joined by TheWrongCat.
Good evening to you all, and we see now the yellow team starting with a bot factory build that started already, and double bot factories again for the white team in the north. They've decided to pump out the inefficient and fairly slow building, but very rapid and easy to continue expanding with bot fabricators for the early game. Now the teams are far enough apart at this stage that rush tactics are going to be a little bit tricky to pull off, but it's always interesting to see in the early game when you have Docs trying to deny this fabricator expansion, which both teams are trying to pull out off the bat.
Yeah, you do tend to see on Forge that you do tend to see those really aggressive Docs just trying to pick off those 1 or 2 fabbers that can be a crucial win early in the game. However, it is to be noted that there is a lot of metal in your spawn, 9 metal effectively in your spawn zone, so that's 9 metal proximal that you can get straight off the bat there. Interesting to see from Yellow that they're actually positioning their Docs effectively at the outskirts of those metal in order to defend those. Yellow even pinging the far peninsula there. Obviously they are going to try and make a play for that expansion.
Now see, normally if you're placing defensive units, you're far better off using the slower moving but heavily armoured vehicles instead of bots. Bots tends to be used, particularly in the early game, for more aggressive raiding tactics, and indeed we can see some yellow Docs coming across to go and attack some undefended fabricators on the white base, which actually could set them back a fair bit. Losing fabricators in the early game is it's not a very good idea in general, because those are what you're using to continue expanding your economy. At the moment those Docs haven't focused them down just yet, though. Are they going to be able to kill them off before they get taken out by the commander defending? He's got to focus him down. The commander has successfully pulled them off.
They did manage to take down 1 fabber, but they have got so many fabbers there. They've got 4 bot fabbers, 5, 6, 7, and a vehicle fabricator. So they it appears as though the white team's definitely going to be playing very defensively early game.
That was a very poor micro there from Yellow. What they really should have done, as soon as they saw those fabricators, those Docs were sent there for exactly that purpose, which was eradicating fabricators. It looked to me like their attention was focused elsewhere. Now we actually need to see another raiding force coming in here to try and dislodge the white stronghold on these 2 fairly safe, usually, metal extractors, but actually got some bombers coming in to help out with that, trying to kill off some early game economy, and we can now see actually Yellow storming into the lead here in Eco. Very effective raiding indeed.
Yeah, and they've got units pretty much everywhere. They have already contained white effectively. They've got a small force of Docs over here. They've been playing around with their air, and I did see a Pelican around. I think they've been so busy actually trying to contain white at this point that they've sort of forgotten their expansion strats and realised almost that they don't necessarily need it. White are in a couple of positions though where they can begin to fight back. They are going much more heavy on the vehicles, whereas Yellow initially went heavier on the bots, so they could fight back a little bit. They've just got to hold on a little bit longer until they can start pumping those vehicles out, but going further and further into this game, it's going to be an issue of who has the bigger economy, more map control and more build ability, and white at this point really need to get that under control. They are doing a bit of raiding on the peninsula though.
Just taking a step back and a zoom out here, just looking at the map, you can see a lot more yellow on the move. The white stuff tends to be sort of clumping up and playing, again, fairly defensive locations, making good use of the heavily armoured vehicles to do that, but at the same time they're relinquishing an awful lot of map control over to Yellow, and map control is all important in this game because that is what enables you to expand your economy. And indeed, if you look into the economy tabs, you can see the Yellow player there with nearly 180 metal versus only 116 for the white team. And that's enabling them to build more units, put more pressure on white, and continue to prevent them from expanding their economy as they need to be doing.
But as I said, with white holding on with their vehicles, now they are making that push down the middle, and yellow rather, don't necessarily have the force to combat this. I think white are a little bit cautious about whether or not they can push out at this point, because there's also that psychological factor of being so surrounded, being so hemmed in. You're cautious about pushing out because you don't want to waste the units that you have. In fact, actually they could push out here. There's no turrets up yet, and they have the vehicles and ants there to be able to take down this Doc and Spark force. So all they need to do is push out and they can win some map control back.
But let's not forget, of course, Marshall, we have the benefit of being able to see everything from both sides. I've not seen an awful lot of scouting by the white team. I say that, I can now see them flying a few fighters over the yellow base and seeing what's in front of them, which is good to see. You need to be scouting constantly to find out what you're up against, to take the best advantage of opportunities that present themselves. The white force now pushing in here. They found a single turret here, which is doing a fairly good job of stopping them. Nowhere near enough. And they've actually got a very significant advantage here in this front line here. They can push in. The commander is exposed, and they need to make sure that they can see that. I don't see that they've scouted the commander. They don't know they can actually put some damage in very early on.
They don't know that the commander is there. They do have very good intel about what's in this base, though, and it does seem as though they've gone very low on the air force here from the yellow team. Not surprising, given the amount of land congestion that there is going on at the moment. We'll probably start to see T2 coming out at some point soon, because the yellow team is just floating so very hard. Either they can get T2 out with all their fabricators, or they can build up a lot more T1 factories. Either way, that is going to be very, very useful indeed. You see the total units there for both teams, even in the army tab. It's pretty much neck and neck actually at this point. So white are still very much in this game, despite being slightly behind earlier on.
And it's worth noting that of that army composition, a large proportion of those are indeed vehicles, which are the more heavily armoured of the two branches. Unfortunately, by not pushing their advantage aggressively enough on that flank, they've actually been successfully thwarted by yellow without dealing a vast amount of damage to their base. And they're now on the back foot, retreating away from a blob of yellow units. They are going to get some reinforcements. They should be able to keep them from getting too close to their base. But that was an advantage that they could have and should have pushed with a bit more scouting.
Yeah, that would have been a really good opportunity. Unfortunately, they did miss it, but yellow now starting to show the early signs of air superiority. There are a few bumblebees coming out, although similarly there are some spinners in the white composition. Unfortunately, none at this frontal army right here. So yellow could potentially creep forward here. Couple of Faber snipes from that bumblebee, really nicely done before it dies, just to prevent white from creeping even further forward. But yellow still getting all their expansion. We can look around. They've finally got that island around the back. They've even secured it with a Galato, which means that no bombers are going to be coming over there, or pelicans, which means that white is going to have to come in with some drifters in order to take this down, or a significant number of bumblebees. And given the pressure they're under right now, they just can't afford to be sending those bumblebees over there, I feel.
Again, I think we're starting to see the effect of the discrepancy between the two economies now. The yellow base is bristling with units. They're coming out. They've got factories which they've been slowly bringing online to take advantage of this eco, which we've seen them floating for the last 5 minutes. And now what they're doing, every single new factory is being built, and instantly they've got a loop of units queued up, ready to go, and they're bringing more and more units online every time. And now we see that there are more vehicles in their composition, hard-hitting, base-killing units, importantly, and they're pushing up onto the front lines now. White have been constructing some defensive turrets to try and deal with it, but sadly, nowhere near as many as they need. They just don't have the units. Unfortunately, that earlier push, which they lost a lot of units in, wasn't successful. They actually lost a lot of units in doing that. I can't see that they've got very much in the way of air units either, which are a very useful mobile defensive force. And actually, there are blobs of units now which are threatening whites on both sides. There's a commander exposed to a little blob of units as well, although he's building some defensive walls as well. And I can see there's a few more forces building up. I've not yet seen any T2 from the yellows, but I suspect that that's not far behind.
Well, it's not queued up yet from them. I think at this point they're just trying to try and get that kill. I think they've realised that they can just outproduce in regular tier units and just push through with sheer numbers at this point. Because if we look in the army tab again, the factory count's 19 to 12. The Fabers are still very much the same, but the mobile units finally pushing away at double that of the white military machine at this point.
And I'm just struggling to see here what options white has on the table, because at the moment this is yellow's game to lose, because they just have double the economy of white. They have a significant advantage in both production and in unit count, and I think that white have got to pull something a bit special out of the bag here, otherwise they're going to slowly find themselves pushed, hemmed back into their base, and the juggernaut of the yellow military machine smashing on their front door very, very loudly indeed.
Well, we do also see some drifters sat around on the back of the planet there that yellow have been trying to produce. So we might even see those drifters come in through the back of the white base, but at this point I don't think they're actually going to have their opportunity to shine here. If we just look at the front of white, there's just so many units pushing in. There's Infernos there as well, which will take damage, and allow the units behind them to creep forward behind that sort of bodyguard, as it were. This commander now finally threatened, taking a few hits down to 97. Not too bad at this point.
Got units in on both sides of him, including some Infernos there, which he does not want to get too close to at all.
You don't want to hug an Inferno.
The Euros. Oh, goodness
Euro.
me. I have no idea. I'm so sorry. He's got Infernos licking at his feet, and he is going to pop any second now.
Any second now. He is finally taking those hits down from the tank. Is he going to get behind the metal extractor? No, he is not. And down with him, he takes a couple of defensive units. But all that's left is the commander on the other side. He tried to get up his T2 factory. It wasn't necessarily enough. And he himself now has just too many units approaching him at this point. And there is nothing he can do about it.
This commander is in for a bit of trouble. If Yellow keep pushing forward with these Infernos, which they ought to do, and there's only a couple of defensive Infernos there from the white player, although he's managing to successfully push those off, he will survive this onslaught, but there's only so far he can run before he meets the second sliver of units already cascading through his base.
Yeah, if we just look around there, we can see just around, there's just so many units, and there's the drifters coming in from the back, finally putting pain to those power generators, and there's nothing else that the white team can do rather to defend against this. Their T2 factory is going down, it is finally decaying, there's nothing building that, so all the resources they put into that are going. I think white at this point are just cementing the fact that they are going to win this game. There is making sure that white can do nothing to come back, and they're crippling their economy. Just look at that economy tab, 34 metal to 200, 300 in fact.
It's almost unsporting. The Yellow Army had the opportunity to kill that commander 2 minutes ago and chose not to, instead direct the base. Now he's walking straight towards yet more Infernos, and there we see the end of the game. Both commanders from white eliminated, and that is 1-0 in this best of 3 for the first bracket.